"You're old. Go live with the pigs." That's what Sienna said while standing in the living room I spent 25 years building. My son Cal had only been gone for 3 weeks. His funeral was barely cold. I still slept with one of his flannel shirts folded beside my pillow. I still brewed 2 cups of coffee in the morning, by habit, one for me, one for the boy I used to call my sunrise, Mr. Halverson. Our family attorney for years wore a suit too big and a face too tight. He cleared his throat once, twice, then opened the folder like it was a coffin. To Rowena Maddox, I leave the cabin on Ash Hollow Ridge, along with any personal contents therein. I blinked. That was it. No mention of the house I helped Cal and Sienna remodel with the retirement funds I cashed in early. No mention of the joint savings I had once transferred to help them avoid foreclosure. No mention of the family photographs the China set from my mother, the garden I'd planted for his 3rd birthday, that still bloomed every spring. To Sienna, Maddox Halverson continued, "I leave all remaining assets, including the residence at 114 Westmere Drive, all investment accounts and the life insurance policy, totaling $5 million. I looked at her. She didn't flinch, just crossed her legs, tugged down her silk skirt, and gave a slow smile. When I finally spoke, barely above a whisper, she leaned closer. "He did what he thought was best," she said. "You're old. Go live with the pigs." I remember staring at the wall behind her. It had a photo of a waterfall. I couldn't hear anything else after that. Later that night, she handed me a packing box. "1 week," she said. "Please be out before Saturday. I have cleaners coming." The next morning, I stood in the doorway of the house, looking out at the road I had walked 1,000 times. The cabin creaked when I opened the door. The hinges gave a slow groan, like even they had forgotten how to move. The air inside was thick with dust and something older, like wet stone and shame. I set down the 2 boxes I'd managed to carry in the back seat of my car. One held clothes. The other held a photo of Cal in kindergarten, my wedding ring, and the old coffee grinder I couldn't leave behind. I hadn't stepped foot in this place in over 15 years. Cal and I used to come here during summers when he was little, before it became too run down, too far, too forgotten. Now it was mine. Officially. Legally. Generously. By the 2nd day, I learned the plumbing hadn't survived the winter. The pipes had burst and frozen. The electric panels sparked the moment I tried to flip a switch, so I stopped trying. At night, I used candles and sat close to the windows until the sun vanished behind the trees. No one called. Linda, my sister, had texted the day I moved out. "Just take some space, Ro. Sienna's grieving too." I didn't reply. A week passed. Then 2. Nothing else came. At the market in town, I caught the look one woman gave me. Sharp and pitying. I heard her whisper to the cashier. She made a scene at the lawyer's office, tried to fight for the money. Poor Sienna. Sienna was rewriting my story like it was hers to tell. By the 3rd week, the mail stopped coming. My name had been taken off the forwarding list. I drove to the post office, but the clerk, someone I'd baked cookies for last Christmas, shrugged. "I heard you moved up to Ash Hollow. Can't forward to an address not listed properly. Talk to the county." Even the land didn't want to remember me. One night, after a cold bath poured from a plastic bucket, I sat on the porch, wrapped in 2 sweaters, and watched the forest swallow the last light of day. And then I heard it. A hollow clink beneath the porch boards, like something metal shifting under wood. The sound came again the next morning. Soft, hollow, deliberate. I bent down near the porch steps and pressed my palm against the floorboard. One plank wobbled under my weight, not nailed down like the others. I fetched a screwdriver from the old shed and pried it loose. There, nestled in the dirt beneath, was a small brass key. It was dulled with age, but the teeth were sharp, like it had been waiting. I turned the key over in my hand. Cal used to play right here, just to the left of the porch swing. He'd bury toy dinosaurs and dig them up again like he'd found treasure. I used to sit on the step with iced coffee, watching him play, laughing when he pretended to be a paleontologist. He always liked hiding things. I crouched low and peered beneath the cabin. Most of the crawl space was damp soil and webs, but one spot along the foundation had a strange bulge like the wall had been patched hastily. I slid under with a flashlight, heart pounding harder with each step. My knees ached and the cold bit through my jeans, but I kept going. When I reached the wall, I saw it, a loose panel of old siding tucked behind a rusted pipe. Behind it was a narrow cavity carved into the stone. Inside sat a small metal box. I pulled it out gently. It was heavy and locked. Back in the kitchen, I laid the box on the table. My fingers trembled as I slid the brass key into the lock. It clicked open on the first try. The hinges gave way with a dry groan. Inside, a thick manila envelope, folded documents tied in a faded ribbon, and one white envelope with my name written in Cal's handwriting. My breath caught in my throat. He had left me something. Not nothing. Not the silence Sienna handed down. He'd hidden something here. Something only I would know to find. I reached for the white envelope, slid my finger under the flap, and pulled out the letter inside. The letter began with my name in bold strokes. Mom and I had to pause before reading the rest. His handwriting was the same as it had been in the birthday cards he used to make by hand back when glue and glitter were more valuable than money. If you're reading this, she took everything. But I left you what really matters. She won't find it. Only you would know where to look. I pressed the page to my chest. He knew. He knew what Sienna would do. He knew what I would need. I untied the ribbon from the manila envelope. Inside were papers, legal ones, thick, heavy documents with seals and signatures. One was stamped amended will. It wasn't notarized, but it had his name, his handwriting, and a date 10 months before the accident. Another page read, Mineral Rights 204 acres, Ash Hollow Ridge. The map attached outlined more than just the cabin lot. It stretched deep into the hills, wider than I'd ever imagined the property extended. My hands shook as I flipped through the next section. Geological reports, soil surveys, colored diagrams marked with circles and values. I didn't understand most of it until I saw the note scribbled in the margin: high concentrations quartz green tourmaline. Potential gem grade, verified by field sampling. I kept going. Near the bottom was a letter addressed to Cal, dated just 6 months ago. It came from a mining company offering a multi-million-dollar purchase of the mineral rights pending proof of title. And he hadn't signed it. Instead, he'd written one sentence below the offer, "Not yet. She's not ready." I folded the paper and stared out the window. The forest looked different now, less like wilderness and more like a locked vault. They thought they left me here to rot. But Cal had given me everything Sienna never would not pity, not crumbs freedom. I gathered the documents back into the box and slid them under the bed, then reached for the cabin's old rotary phone. It was time to call a lawyer. The tires crunched up the gravel without warning, loud and titled, like they belonged. I stepped out onto the porch just in time to see her red SUV roll to a stop near the oak tree that marked the edge of the lot. Sienna stepped out like she was arriving at a gala. Hair curled, lashes, thick wrist stacked with bracelets that jingled when she tossed her keys into her designer bag. The heels of her boots sank into the soft earth, but she didn't care. She gave the cabin a long, theatrical once-over. Wow, this is actually worse than I imagined. I didn't say a word. She strutted up the steps, nostrils flaring slightly at the scent of wood smoke and rain. I stayed near the doorway, arms crossed, waiting. "Anyway," she said, smoothing her skirt, "don't get too comfortable. That cabin, it's still technically part of the estate. I tilted my head. We never transferred the deed. Cal was going to, but well, we know how that turned out. She smiled like she'd just told a joke. You might be squatting here now, but I've got plans. Developers have been sniffing around. This ridge is getting valuable. I might sell it, clear it out, build something worth looking at. Just figured I'd give you a heads up before you invest too much in curtains or whatever this is. She waved a hand vaguely at the porch, as if the structure offended her. Still, I said nothing. She waited for a reaction. I gave her none. Just looked at her like I was reading a very short book. Suit yourself, she muttered, spinning on her heel. Just don't be surprised when you get a notice. I watched her get in the SUV, adjust the mirror, and check her lipstick before backing down the hill. She thought she'd delivered a blow. But I was already looking past her to the edge of the woods, to the hills beyond, to everything she'd never see coming. The post office was quieter than usual that morning. Just a couple of people in line and a clerk stacking boxes behind the counter. I was there to check on a certified letter. My new attorney had mailed a simple verification to start the process of validating Cal's second will. I was about to ask for it when I heard my name. Well, not my name exactly, but enough to stop me mid-step. She's burning through that money, like a matchbook, said one of the older women near the bulletin board. Bought 3 new cars in 6 weeks, another added, and booked a 2-month vacation in Paris. They weren't whispering. They didn't need to. In a town like ours, gossip didn't require volume. It traveled on tone and nods. I stayed near the mailboxes and pretended to scan a flyer for a lost cat. Heard she's already taking out loans, one of them continued. Use the house as collateral. That's a lot of leverage for someone who just came into money. I held my breath, then stepped up to the teller when it was my turn. The boy behind the glass couldn't have been older than 20, face still soft like he hadn't learned caution yet. Anything for Rowena Maddox, I asked. He checked his system, clicked a few keys. 1 letter from a law office, he said, handing it over. Then, lowering his voice a little, your daughter-in-law was just here yesterday, transferring money like it's going out of style. He grinned like it was a compliment. I just nodded and left. The sun hit the sidewalk in that flat, cold way it always does after gossip. But inside my coat pocket was a document with more weight than her handbags could carry. That afternoon, I drove to Bellevue, the next town over, and met with Mr. Linton, my new lawyer. He wasn't from here, didn't know Sienna, didn't ask questions when I showed him the amended will and mineral rights papers. He just adjusted his glasses and said, "You've got a solid claim. Quiet. Legal. Strategic. Exactly what I needed. The paperwork would take a few weeks to file, which was fine, because time was something I had again. Dr. Ernest Fallow wore flannel steel-toe boots and a grin that didn't match the quiet way he moved through the woods. He spent 3 days walking the ridge with a satchel of instruments, pausing to hammer rock samples, photograph soil patterns, and scribble in a worn notebook. I kept my distance. At first, just brought him coffee in the mornings and sandwiches at noon. But on the 3rd afternoon, he came to the porch with dust on his sleeves and a look of quiet awe. "Ms. Maddox," he said, "you're sitting on a gold mine quartz. Yes, but the real value is the green tourmaline. It's gem grade, and it runs deep. If your reports are accurate, and they are, you've got over 12 million in potential extractions. That's just phase 1. My hand tightened around the coffee mug. "And that's not counting future royalties," he added. "If you license this right, you could be earning for decades." I nodded once and looked out at the trees. The same woods Sienna had laughed at. By the end of the week, I'd signed with a private mining firm, quietly, cleanly. My name never made it into the papers. The payments were staggered, structured, and carefully funneled into a trust account with Linton's help. No sudden windfalls, no headlines. Just slow, deliberate security. The first thing I did was hire 2 local contractors once who knew how to keep their mouths shut and had them install new plumbing, electrical systems, and central heating. The insulation went in silently. The water ran hot. The light switches clicked like music. But from the outside, the cabin looked the same. Same peeling paint, same loose porch rail, same dented mailbox leaning left. No one in town asked questions, and I didn't offer answers. That winter, I sat by a working fireplace with a proper mug of black coffee and watched the snow gather at the window panes. There were fresh sheets on the bed, running water in the sink, and 20 feet beneath the floorboards, gemstones older than time. I didn't need gold chains or announcements. I had something better. I had options. And options are what drew her back. It was dusk when I heard the knock, soft, uncertain. Not the sharp, smug rhythm I remembered. Just a hesitant tap that barely echoed through the now insulated walls. I opened the door to find Sienna standing there. Her makeup was gone. The gloss, the gold, the sharp heels all stripped away. Her coat was too thin for the weather. Her hands were wrapped around each other like she wasn't sure what to do with them. And her eyes had finally caught up to the mess she'd made. "Rowena," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I know I don't deserve it, but I need your help." I stepped aside and let her in. She walked into the same cabin she once mocked, now warm and clean, and somehow still looked surprised that it hadn't crumbled. She sat at the edge of the table like a child sent to the principal's office. I poured 2 mugs of coffee and slid one to her. She held it like she needed the heat more than the drink. "The house is gone," she said finally. "Foreclosed 2 months ago. The cars, too. The accounts. I leveraged everything. Tried to flip investments that didn't flip. The Paris trip. That was on credit. I didn't move. Just watched her try to piece together a version of herself that didn't reek of desperation. The firm dropped me. Word got around. No clients. I'm in debt. Real debt." She swallowed hard. "I'm not asking for pity. I'm just asking, please, I don't have anywhere else." I leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, hands wrapped around my own mug. "You want something?" I said calmly, "From the woman you told to go live with pigs." She winced. Not because I raised my voice, I hadn't, but because the memory itself was sharp enough. She nodded slowly, tears clinging to the edge of her lashes. "I know what I said, and I regret it every day." I stood, walked toward the window, and watched the moon rise above the ridge. Behind me, she waited for judgment. But I was already thinking about the terms. I didn't say yes that night. I let her sit there, unraveling, ashamed, staring into her untouched coffee while the minutes stretched between us like rope. She expected tears or yelling, but I'd wasted too many of both to offer them now. In the morning after I fixed a quiet breakfast, I laid out the terms. "I'll pay off your debt," I said, "every last dollar. But not as a gift. It'll be a loan. 5% annual interest, 10 years to repay." Her eyes widened. 10, that's more generous than any bank would give you." I added, my tone even. She nodded slowly. "Okay. Yes. Thank you. I'm not done." Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. "You'll work here. Every weekend. Saturdays and Sundays. Cleaning, fixing, hauling whatever's needed." Sienna's shoulders stiffened. "Here. Here." Her mouth twitched, but she said nothing. I let the silence stretch before I gave her the last piece. "And you'll write an apology. A real one. Not just to me, to the entire family. All the things you said, all the lies. You'll read it aloud at the next holiday gathering." She blinked. "You want me to humiliate myself?" "No," I said. "You already did that. This is about correction. You corrected my name in private. Now you'll correct it in public." Her chin dipped. Her hands folded tightly in her lap. I could see the old pride trying to rise again, but it didn't. Not fully. If I agree, she asked softly, do you really think they'll forgive me? I'm not responsible for their forgiveness, I replied. Only mine. And I haven't decided yet. She sat with that. Then she nodded. All right. I'll do it. All of it. I didn't thank her. This wasn't charity. It was structure. Boundaries. Terms I should have set years ago when the first insult was still a whisper. We signed the paperwork 3 days later in my lawyer's office. That weekend, she showed up in jeans and boots, hair pulled back, ready to work. And I handed her a broom. The broom dragged across the floor with a tired rhythm, like regret made tangible. Sienna knelt near the baseboards, scrubbing at mud tracked in from the woods. Her shoulders moved stiffly, every motion deliberate, measured, almost penitent. I sat on the porch with a mug of strong coffee. The same porch where she'd once curled her lip and called it a shack. Now she wiped its corners with trembling hands, while I sat in quiet, watching steam rise from ceramic and time shift in my favor. She hadn't said much since the first day. Only the occasional, "Where's the mop?" or "Do you want this box moved?" But today, as she rinsed a rag in the bucket by the door, she paused. "How did you afford all this?" she asked without looking up. I didn't answer right away. I took a sip of coffee, watching the horizon over the hills where the ridge turned gold under the morning light. "The land you laughed at," I said, finally. It listened. She turned her head slightly. "What you saw, dirt and bugs and trees. But Cal saw what it could be. And now, I own every stone beneath your feet." Sienna stared at the floor. "The house, the cars," she whispered, "all gone. I thought I'd won. You thought wrong." She didn't argue, just wrung out the rag and went back to scrubbing. The sun moved higher, casting long lines through the trees and onto the porch floor. Birds chirped in the branches above. The old cabin, warm and humming with power, stood taller than it had in years. I leaned back in the chair and let the warmth soak into my bones. The silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned. I glanced down at Sienna, still working, still quiet. She looked smaller than she once had, less gold, less bite, less fire. But maybe something softer was beginning to take its place. The hills stretched far and wide beyond the porch. Quiet, steady, mine. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel buried beneath them. I felt rooted, ready, and already beginning again.